Hey, what's up? It's Zero to 9, and today we're going to talk about creating transparent multiband devices. And what I mean by transparent is we want to create a rack to split the audio signal into different frequency bands, but the output signal should be exactly the same as the input signal, and that's what transparent means. We want to create a device which has no side effects on the audio running through it. And for example, in Ableton Live, we have different ways to do this. And a lot of them are actually not transparent because in most cases, if we want to split a signal into different bands, we're using an EQ or something similar to EQ in another device. And a lot of these EQs, they will cause phase shifts at the cutoff point. And if you sum together the signal afterwards, the sum of these signals is not the same as the input signal. And we want to avoid it to get the best audio quality possible. And I will show you a way to do that just with Ableton plugins, with Max for Live plugins. And to start off, I will show you how different Ableton devices, how they will process the signal and what actually happens. And to start off, I've loaded an operator instance here playing a square wave. And I've also loaded up an oscilloscope here so that we can see how the waveform looks like originally. So if I play it, you see it's a perfect square. And now I will just enable different Ableton devices to see what they are doing with the signal. And the first one is maybe the most obvious one. In Ableton Live, we have the EQ3, and it's by default has 3 different bands. And I've just put it in a rack here. So the first one is the low, second one is the mid, and third one is the high band. And let's just see what happens with the square wave if we apply this audio effect rack. You can also hear that if I switch it off, the sound changes a little bit, especially in the mids or low mid. The sound is a little bit different, and you can see that we don't have a square wave after enabling this rack. The waveform looks really crazy, and that's because the EQ here introduces a phase shift, and then the sum of the signal is not the same as the input signal. And you can see we have an option here to select 48 dB per octave, which is a very steep filter. We can also select 24 dB per octave, which is still kind of steep filter, but not as steep as 48. But even with 24, you can still see that it still introduces a phase shift, which causes problems in our output signal. So the question is what we can do here. And I will just give you another example how any EQ will introduce phase shifts as long as you're not using a linear phase EQ. But the problem with linear phase EQ is that it has some other downsides. It introduces quite a big amount of latency. Also, it's a little bit more CPU heavy, and you have other artifacts like pre-ringing. So if you want to use something a lot in your project, then it's maybe not very recommended to use a lot of linear phase EQs. And I will just show you an example here. I've loaded up a Pro Q3 device, and I've just enabled one band here, a low cut at 10 Hertz. So the low cut is really, really low. Nothing is playing there, but you will see that still the output signal is not the same as the input signal, even if there's absolutely no frequency content there. And that's because even if you do something like this, it will still cause a phase shift in the signal. You see, it's not that dramatic as if we were using the Ableton EQ, for example. But still, even if I have a low cut set so low, it still changes the signal a little bit. And we can try to experiment with the steepness of the filter to see how it behaves. So you see, the steeper the filter, the bigger the problem usually, the bigger the phase shift. So you have to be aware of the fact. It doesn't always means that the sound coming out of the device is worse. You have to check it. Just sometimes it's not a big issue, but for the splitter devices, we want to use something which is as transparent as possible. Let's check another device here. A very popular device is the OTT from Ableton, which is the Multiband Dynamics plugin, and I've set the amount to 0 here. So that means that we are not doing any processing. So we will just use it as a frequency splitter. So we will split the signal into several bands, and let's see what is the output. So you see, it's the same problem as with the EQ3. And now what's the solution for that problem is we have a device from Max for Life, which is called Invisible Splitter. And it's similar to the EQ3. It has kind of the same settings. You have just a frequency for splitting lows, mid and highs. And then you can select the band you want to have. And I've created a rack here to split the different frequencies. So we have a low band, everything below 200, you can select it here. Then we have the mid band, which is basically everything between the low and the high band. And then we have the high band with just everything above the high frequencies, or the high frequency cutoff here at 2500 Hertz. And what makes this device kind of invisible is that the fact that it just uses a 6 dB slope on the filter cutoff, and that's why it doesn't shift the phase as much as the other plugins. Of course, if you're using a filter which has not as a steep cutoff as the others, you get kind of some overlap, and it's a little bit harder to really extract a specific frequency band. But it's always has advantages and disadvantages. You have to just think about it, what will work better for you. But in case you need a device which doesn't introduce any phase shifts or changes your sound, this is the way to go. And I can show you that this device doesn't hurt our sound. So you can use something like this for your processing. For example, you can use like the splitter rack for making a saturation rack, so that you can process the lows, mids and high differently. You can apply some EQ, compression, saturation, whatever you want to. You can use this rack for anything. I will also put the link to the rack in the description, so you can download it for free. The only thing you need is the Max for Life device. There's the frequency splitter here. I will also put the link in the description so you can download it. And then as a last example, kind of real world example here, I've used the splitter rack here on a synth sound, and I've just put an exciter here on the low band, some saturation on the mids and saturation on the highs with different algorithms, so we can listen to it, how it sounds like with some processing. Just as a sound example, or if you want to know what you can do with a rack like this. So I hope that's helpful. Thanks for watching. If you liked that video, leave a like and subscribe. See you in the next tutorial. Have a nice evening. Ciao, bye bye.